Hello, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals of Econ 112. I hope everybody's doing well today. It's great to see each and every one of you. Okay, well, we're going to continue exploring into our exploration of Chapter 4, which is elasticity. Remember, the whole basis of elasticity is we want to understand how responsive we are to changes. So far, we've been looking at the price elasticity of demand. This means how much people demand, or the quantity that they demand, how is that going to be affected relative to changes in price, right? So if a sweater goes on sale by 30% and all of a sudden society wants to buy twice as many sweaters, well, that increase in the purchase of sweaters is actually more than what that price change is going to be. So that's elastic. Elastic is when we have more responsive changes than our change in price. Inelastic means that we can have price changes, but our buying patterns stay relatively stable, or the amount that we're demanding at each price point stays relatively stable. Remember that this is all represented by the slope of the demand curve. So I don't know, I just think that's really neat. All right, so that's really important to remember. Inelastic means that we don't change much, right? So if something goes up by $5 and I buy the exact same amount of it and everybody else buys the exact same amount of it, then, you know, that's relatively inelastic. No one changed relative to this price change. If we change the price of a candy bar by 25 cents and no one ever buys that candy bar again, then that's a very elastic response. There was a large change relative to this price. Okie dokie, well, let's go ahead and get right into the slides today. So let me go ahead and share my screen, get things set up. Got too many monitors. Yeah, that's probably a good problem to have, though. So let's think about the factors that influence the elasticity of demand, because this is really where we left off last time. 3 of them are going to be 1, the closeness of substitutes, 2, the proportion of income spent on the good, and 3, the time that's been elapsed since this price change, right? So let's go ahead and jump into each one of these so we can talk about them a little bit closer. First is the closeness of substitutes. Now, the closer the substitutes for a good or service, the more elastic is the demand for that good or service. Let's think about this. If crunchy peanut butter, and don't worry, I have plenty of examples to go around today. If crunchy peanut butter was the only type of peanut butter that we possibly had to choose from, and I like my peanut butter and banana sandwiches, let's be real. If this was the only option, then if prices changed by $1, I'd still probably buy the same number of jars, right? I'd have a relatively inelastic demand at that point. Now, what if we had substitutes? Let's say that we have almond butter, which is another nut-based butter that we could use with our banana sandwiches, or we have creamy peanut butter, which is truly atrocious compared to crunchy peanut butter, but hey, everybody has their own thing, and it's still technically a substitute. So when we have these different substitutes, that means I'm becoming more elastic into my demand for crunchy peanut butter, right? Because I have 2 other really good alternatives. So if you raise the price by crunchy peanut butter by $1, well, we can all switch to almond butter or even the creamy peanut butter, right? We could do that. So we are going to become more elastic in our demand for the crunchy peanut butter because we have other alternatives available to us, right? Since there's close substitutes, we end up becoming more elastic. Now, it's not necessarily the same for all goods. This one's special. All right, so you might notice, because I drink tea in every video, that I really like tea. It's delicious. So this is the only type of cold-hardy tea plant that can actually grow in our area. So I brought this in from the garden for you to see. This one's still a baby. It's pretty young, but eventually these tea leaves will be things that I can make tea out of. This will get to about 10 to 15 feet tall. I'm probably going to keep it chopped down to about 4 feet through pruning, right? But okay, do I have a close substitute to this? No. Not really. So there's one very specific type of plant that I want, and only one variety of that plant that can actually grow in the soil and the atmosphere and the humidity that we have here, right? So I'm going to still have about the same purchasing behaviors, and we're all going to have the same purchasing behaviors, no matter really what happens to the price, right? We're relatively inelastic in our demand for this good, because the price of this could go up instead of like $50, go to $60 or $70. It could go to $100, and my demand's not really going to change because there's not a close substitute for me to easily switch to, right? Now, we do see that things that are necessities tend to also have more inelastic goods, right? These are kind of your big picture ideas. We need clothing, food, shelter. If I told you, like, hey, what's your elasticity for food? Well, I'm not talking about just one particular type of candy bar compared to other types of candy bars. Just food in general, you're relatively inelastic. You got to eat or you die, right? So if it's food or no food, then you will pay pretty much anything to be able to have the food. Your consumption or your demand for food isn't going to change much relative to price changes because you still need that sort of substance, right? So necessities, you tend to have a relatively inelastic demand for. Now, luxury goods, such as, you know, exotic vacations. I have a really, really nice 12 terabyte hard drive that I love, but this is a luxury, right? There's other things that I could technically have and I could switch to. I could decide to have multiple 4 terabyte hard drives. I could decide to instead, if the price of this went up another $200-300, I can instead decide to buy another laptop or another few monitors or other things like that, right? So luxuries tend to have more elastic demands. Now, these are important things to remember because I will give you examples on both your homework and your test, where I'm going to say, like, hey, this is something that has close substitutes, or it's something that you'll know has close substitutes, right? Like one brand of pen. Well, there's all the other brands of pens. And it might be something that's more necessary, like food, clothing, shelter, or something that's a luxury, like a high-end sports car, right? And I'm going to ask you, would this be a more elastic or inelastic price elasticity of demand? And knowing what these nuances and differences are actually really important. So necessities, more on the elastic side, luxuries, more on the elastic side. Because you can walk away, right? My life is not really better or worse off by taking a vacation to, I don't know, Brazil or Australia. That would be nice. I could use a vacation. A vacation sounds really cool. So we have this closeness of substitutes idea, right? Then we also have to think about the proportion of the income that you're spending on the good. So the greater the proportion of an income you're spending on the good, the larger the elasticity of demand for that good. Okay, let's think about it. This pack of paper clips, right? They come in, this is only 100. They don't even sell them in like the 100 packs alone. You have to get 5 of these and get a 500 pack if you're going over to Staples. So let's say we got a 500 pack of, you know, paper clips. Well, that's a very small percentage of my income. It's not that much. So if the price of paper clips goes up by 10% and it goes from like $2.50 to $2.75, I'm going to be relatively inelastic. I'm still going to buy the paper clips because that's such a low portion of my income that a percentage increase in it doesn't really matter too much to my overall well-being and the income that I'm spending on that good. Now, back to the idea of, you know, a wonderful 12 terabyte hard drive that costs $800, $1,000 or so. That's a pretty sizable portion of my income. Like, that's something I kind of got to think about before I purchase. So if the price of this goes up by 10% and we go from $1,000 to $1,100, well, that's a much larger portion of my income. So I might be more elastic to that, right? Because if the price of this goes up by 10%, I might say, wow, okay, it was already so expensive to buy that $1,000 hard drive, but now we're talking about an $1,100 hard drive. Wow, okay, I'm going to have to walk away. I'm going to have to change my buying patterns. We're all going to have to change our buying patterns because this is a very large increase, even though they're the same percentage, right? A 10% increase on these paper clips versus the 10% increase on the hard drive. But the hard drive is a much larger portion of your income. So you're going to tend to be more elastic on those decisions than small but similar percentage price changes on something that doesn't really cost you that much to begin with. So you don't really know if there's an additional 25%, right? Let's put this safely back on the ground so I don't knock it over. Stay. Okay. So we have the proportion of income that we're spending on the good, right? So we got 1, 2, let's go for 3. The time elapsed since a price change. So the more time consumers have to adjust to a price change, or the longer that a good can be stored without losing its value, the more elastic the demand for the good. Okay, let's think about that. So right here, we got a Nintendo Switch, right? Right here, we got a Wii U. I know, this looks like an antique relic to most of y'all in class, but these are what people played way back in the day. I actually thought about pulling out like my old Game Boy Color and my Game Boy SP and my Game Boy Original, but then I just felt really sad about how many decades have gone by. Okay, right? But so let's think about what's happening to price changes in these markets. Well, if the price changes in a Wii U that hasn't been sold in, I don't know, 10 years, people bought these 10 years ago, well, I've had a lot of time to adjust to those price changes. For example, these are kind of rare now. The prices have gone up, but I've had a long time to consider that, to figure out what I'd be willing to pay for it, what I'd be willing to trade it for. Like, I can make adjustments for that, which means I can be relatively elastic. I can say, oh, if those are going for 300 bucks right now, like, you know, maybe not, because I know they're still going to be about that same price later. I have longer to think about it. I can be relatively elastic because this can be stored without losing much value, right? Because these are relatively rare. Okay. Now, switches. We didn't really have much time to adjust these price changes because they came out and then they had a $50 off coupon almost instantly. And then people were like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Well, it was the big Christmas rush, and then everybody kept buying them anyways, because even though there was a $50 coupon, they were still going to buy a lot. So they continued to buy a lot. They didn't really buy a lot more because they were already buying everything that's on the shelf. There's a reason that, you know, you couldn't get these for a few months at a time, and it's because people were relatively inelastic. They were going to purchase it no matter what the prices were. So when you have a long time to adjust, you can tend to be more elastic. Us as a society, we tend to be more elastic. If the prices go up, we can say, you know what, we got a long time to adjust. We got a long time in this market. The Wii U's aren't going anywhere. They're still going to exist. So I can walk away, or I can decide to buy. I can change based upon the price differences within this market. But the Switch, when that came out, we had a very short period of time. There was a relatively fast price change that happened in this market. People panicked, they bought everything, and because they were going to buy everything anyways. If price could have gone up by $200-300, they still would have bought everything. It was a relatively inelastic market because of a short window of time. So the time period that's elapsed since a price change matters. All right. So remember that our demand curve is downward sloping, right? We go from the top left of our graph, where we intersect with our y-axis, all the way down to the bottom right, where we intersect with our x-axis. So we have these relationships of where society is willing to kind of pay for certain goods, right? It's a collection of the different quantity demands at different points. So we have, for example, in this situation where we're costing dollars for a slice of pizza, well, if the pizzas are $5, well, we'll see that a lot of people want it, right? We come down here, we got $5 for pizza, we go across to our demand curve, like 40 people want pizza when we have, and it's $5. Now, if that's, you know, a relationship of the quantity that's demanded at this price point. If it's instead $20, well, okay, maybe we're not going to want as much. That's very pricey. The quantity that's demanded at $20 is completely different than the quantity that's demanded at $5. Now, the cool part about elasticity is it's going to change at these different price points. A $1 off coupon for a pizza is not going to matter much when pizza's $20-25. Like that $1 coupon, you're like, okay. But if it's a $5 pizza and I give you a $1 off coupon, you're much more likely to be like, ooh, that's a good deal. So our elasticity is going to change depending on where we are in these relationships in between prices and quantities. And that's super cool. So we're going to think about the midpoint. The whole reason why we use the midpoint formula in this class, and you're going to understand a little bit more about that when we keep going on, is because we like to use averages. When we use averages, then we know if something is a big change or not. You know, a $1 off coupon on your car, on a whole car, isn't going to matter very much because the average price of a car is very expensive compared to $1. But the average price of a candy bar isn't. A $1 coupon for a candy bar is going to probably have a lot more significance because it's a lot compared to what the average cost of those candy bars are. So let's start at the very middle. Let's start at the very middle. Okay, let's go to the middle. Let's say that we're going to have a price of $12.50. right? Because we see that our prices can be anywhere from 0 to 25. After 25, we're not buying anymore, because if you're paying more than $25 for pizza, that pizza better be covered in gold and walking to me. Like, 25 is too much for pizza. So at that point, we stop buying it. But in between, let's say it's $12.50 for a pizza. Pricey, but reasonable. Okay. So at $12.50 for a pizza, maybe 25 pizzas are demanded an hour. The quantity demand is 25 at that point, because that's about what people are wanting, okay, per hour in the market. Now, at this point, it's relatively unit elastic. You can work out the numbers if you want, but if we go up by $1 or down by $1, we see that we have a relatively one-to-one situation where it's going to have about the same effect. Now, let's think about our ranges of elastic and inelastic, yeah? So as pizza gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, as it goes down from $10 to $8 to $6 to $5, we become relatively inelastic. Yeah? Why is that? Let's think about that. If I came up to you and said that you could have as many pizzas as you want for $2 a piece, you're probably buying a lot of pizzas, right? And if I change the price by like 25% at $2, and we go from like $2 to $1.50, that's not going to matter much. I'm still going to buy a lot of pizza. The lot of pizza that I'm buying at $2 is probably similar to the a lot of pizza that I'm buying at $1.50. So at that point, I'm not making huge sweeping changes for different sort of price changes, because I'm already buying a lot of things. Now let's think more about the elastic side, where we might be more responsive to price changes. Let's say that we have that $20 pizza. Well, at the $20 pizza, almost no one's buying it. We're like, wow, this is ridiculous. Who really wants to do that? This is so pricey. Well, if you give maybe $1 off coupon to a $20 pizza, you might get a few people in the store, right? I might be like, you know what, still pricey, but I'll get one, and only one. But you might still get a few more people. Well, going from 0 to a few people, or 0 to a few pizzas sold, that's a huge change relative to 0, compared to like going from 40 pizzas sold to 50 pizzas sold. Well, that's only an increase of a certain percentage, like an increase of 25%. That's not the same as going from 0 to 5. These are two completely different situations that we have to actually explain, and we do that through elasticity. So the higher the price and lower the quantity, the more elastic we are to price changes. Price changes are going to make a relatively large change in the quantity that's demanded at those points. If we have a very low price, we're in a relatively inelastic zone. I'm still going to buy a lot, whether you increase it by 25% or decrease it by 25%, because it's already a really good price. So this is a relatively inelastic zone, and somewhere in the middle we'll have a unit elastic part where it's a one-to-one relationship. Don't worry, on the test I like to ask you what unit elasticity is, but I don't necessarily ask you to find it on a graph, so don't worry about that. I will ask you to calculate elasticity if I give you, for example, what the information is about the quantity before and after, and what the price is before and after. I might ask you, what's the price elasticity of demand? Or is it increasing or decreasing? Or is it large? Is it elastic? Is it inelastic? I might ask you for details, but I won't ask you to point out where unit elastic is on a graph. So let's say in our example, because, you know, let's make it a little bit more concrete here. Let's say that we're going from a $25 pizza to a $15 pizza. Okay. That's a pretty huge jump, right? We're going from $25 to $15. Well, I'm not paying $25 for a pizza, but I will certainly pay $15 for a pizza. And what we see here is that a lot of people agree with that mentality if we're looking at the demand for the entire society. So at $25, there was no pizzas sold, but now at $15, there's 20 pizzas sold. So that's an increase from 0 to 20. That's actually a lot, right? Because the average in between that is 10, and the average between those prices is 20. Wow. Okay. So if the average price is 10, or excuse me, average price is 20, and the average quantity is 10, well, then we know what the price elasticity is. Well, if you work it out, please, by the way, please work it out. Work out this example. If you don't get the number 4, there's a problem, okay? I'm going to work it out for you in a second, but work it out first. Pause your video here. Make sure. But it's going to end up equaling 4. 4 is relatively elastic, right? Because we kind of have this range of elasticities. And from between 0 and 1, we tend to be inelastic. These are when we're not making very large changes in our demand based upon changes in price. Then we have unit elastic at 1. Greater than 1, these are elastic goods, where we're changing our buying patterns or our demand or our quantity demand by more than what the price changes in percentage terms. Okay, so let's go ahead and work this out as an example. Give me a second. I'm going to pause so I can set it up. Okay, so remember, here's our, oops, let me switch to red. Here's our equation right here. Our price elasticity of demand is equal to the percentage change in quantity demand over the percentage change in price. So there's really two parts of this. There's the top part of the equation, and then there's the bottom part of the equation. So we kind of got to put those two together, right? So let's start with number 1 right here. So we're going to go to number 1 right here. What we're going to do is look at, let's go back to the thing. Okay, so we see that, let's think about first our quantity, because our quantity is on top, so we have our percentage change in quantity. What we need to know is what the change in quantity was relative to the average quantity. So what we have here is that we had a change. Oh, I'm on the wrong slide. That's what I get for flipping in between today. There we go. All right, so we see what's going to happen with our quantity change, right? We go from 0 at this 25 to 20 pizzas. So our change is going to be 20. Okay, and this is going to be relative to what's our average quantity? Well, our average quantity in between 0 and 20, well, that's going to be equal to 10, right? So that's the first part of our equation, is that we're going to have, let's go back to black. Our change in quantity, which that's going to be equal to 20, divided by our average quantity, which we knew is equal to 10. So this is going to be equal to 2. So we're going to have 2 that we're going to put in this top part of the equation. All right, now let's go to the second part. Let's figure out what the bottom part of the equation is. So let's call this number 2. So number 2 right here. But with this one, for the bottom part of the equation, we're going to need to know what our change in price is relative to our average price. So let's go ahead and think about that. Let's go back to here. Well, we know we went from $25 to $15, right? So we had a decrease of $10. So our price changed by $10. And we know that our average price in between the two, so halfway in between 25 and 15, well, that's going to be equal to 20. Okay, so that's easy. We can just plug and chug that through. Well, so we know that our change in price, we changed by $10, and our average price was $20. It's going to be equal to 0.5. Well, okay, so our price elasticity of demand, price elasticity. I promise I'll give you a prettier equation on your test. This is going to be equal to 2 divided by 0.5, which equals 4. That is what you should have gotten when you paused this video and tried it yourself. Okay? If you didn't, please go back. Please keep trying, because this is going to be important to know. So with this, we see that this is clearly above 1, right? Which means that we're going to have a relatively elastic situation right here. Okay, well then let's go to the next one. Let's think about what's happening if we're on the bottom part. Maybe let's go from a price of $10, and at $10, we have 30 pizzas an hour that are being demanded. Cool, awesome, okay. That's a much cheaper price than earlier, so we know that we're kind of in the inelastic range. And then let's say that we have a decrease in price when we're already buying a lot of pizzas. Well, if we go from $10 to $0, it's free, so you'll take as many pizzas as you want. Well, then we demand 50. If they're completely free, we're going to have 50 people go into the store, and we're going to have a quantity of 50 pizzas that we're going to take out of the store. And we're wondering what the situation is in between these two. Now, write down the price elasticity of demand equation for yourself. Remember that we're looking for the percentage change in quantity demand over the percentage change in price. Well, we know, fill in these pieces yourself because, you know, I need you to be reliant on getting yourself through these equations. What we'll know for the quantity part at the top is that we know we went from 30 to 50, so we had a change of 20 that had an average amount of pizza, or the average quantity demanded of pizza at 40. Okay, so that means at the top we're going to have 20 divided by 40. Okay, then when it comes to price, which is on the bottom part of the equation, we're going to see that we had a $10 change in price, and the average is 5. So this is 10 divided by 5. Well, when we put those two different pieces together, what it ends up coming out to is going to be equal to 1/4, where our elasticity is going to be equal to 1/4. Well, that's less than 1, right? When you see an elasticity equal to 1/4, what you should immediately think about is, oh, Dr. Plemmmons told me that it's inelastic if it's below 1. This is clearly inelastic. We're not changing our buying patterns a lot. We're going to free pizza and we're only having 20 more pizzas, and that's because we were already consuming a lot because the price was so low. So we're not necessarily really changing our spending habits by a lot compared to what our price changes are. So that's the inelastic zone. We have our unit elastic, which is just what happens when it's in the middle. So we need to think about total revenue and elasticity. Okay. So total revenue, this is the amount of money that ends up in your bank account. Where's the thing I have a rubber band that we're going to use in just a second for an example. Don't worry. So the total revenue is essentially just all the money you're making from the sale of a good or service. So how much money is coming into your bank account from selling those 50 pizzas? Well, if you're selling 50 pizzas at $0, no money comes to your bank account, right? But if you're selling 20 pizzas for, I don't know, $15, $12.50, well, that's more money in your bank account than if you had sold the 50 for a much cheaper price. So we have to think about what's happening. What's the relationship in between the amount of money that you take home that ends up in your bank account from selling your goods and services versus what our elasticity looks like, versus how much we're actually selling, right? So when the prices change, the total revenue changes. So there can be price changes up and down, and depending on where you are and what your elasticity is, this price change up might make your total revenue go up or down, right? Because we have a relationship in between the two. A rise in price does not always increase total revenue. Let's think about an example of that. If it's that pizza, right? If it's $12.50, I'm making a decent amount of money in my bank account. I'm pretty happy. And I say, you know what? I want to make more money. I want to raise the price. So I raise the price to $25. And every single person walks out of my pizza store. Well, what good has that done me? I have no money in my bank account if no one will come into my store because my prices are too high. So we have to figure out where the balance in between this total revenue component and this price component is. So we call this price elasticity of demand. Well, then just all goes along with what we've been learning so far, right? So the change in total revenue due to a change in price depends on the elasticity of demand. What does that mean? Well, let's think about what it even means to be elastic. To be elastic means that you're more responsive to in your quantity patterns than what you would be to a relative change in price patterns. So if demand is elastic, that means a 1% price cut. So I put it on sale, 1%. I'm getting more than 1% additional customers coming into my store. I'm having more than 1% additional of my goods and services being sold. So I'm reducing the price by a little and I'm making a lot more. That's when we're talking about an elastic demand. Now, if we're in the inelastic range, people aren't going to change their buying patterns. So there's no reason for me to give them a price cut, right? Because that's just money away from me. If they're going to buy 3 cars, no matter if it's $40,000 or $30,000, then I don't change the price to $30,000. I keep it at $40,000 so they're going to buy it the same, right? So 1% price cut increases the quantity sold by less than 1%. That relationship means that you're inelastic. In exchange, the third one that we have is unit elastic. That just means when there's a 1 percentage point change in price, we have a 1 percentage point change in quantity. Okie dokie. Yeah. So we have this idea of the total revenue test. The total revenue test is a method of estimating the price elasticity of demand by observing what these changes in total revenue are. So we can look at how much money goes in and out of the bank account. We can know what our price change is. Using those two pieces of information, we can say if it's an elastic or an inelastic good, and that's pretty cool. Okay, so let me give you an example. Take a rubber band. Pause the video. Go find a rubber band in your house. If you don't have a rubber band, imagine you have a rubber band. If you don't have a rubber band and you have long hair and tend to use elastics, grab one of those. But get a rubber band. See, I put it in between my 2 fingers like this. Okay. Now take one of your hands. That's your total revenue hand right there. Okay. Doesn't matter which one it is. Just choose one. Total revenue hand. Okay. Then you have your other hand. Imagine this is your price hand. Yeah? All right. So we got our total revenue and we got price, and we're going to compare these two together. Let's think about what will happen with total revenue and price, and if that means if it's elastic or not. Okay, all right, so let's have situation 1. We're going to have a price cut. Price goes down, right? And then our total revenue on our total revenue hand, because our price hand went down. Okay, well then we have our total revenue hand. If total revenue goes up, what just happened for this rubber band? It's way more stretched out than it was before, right? That's clearly elastic. All right, okay, so if price goes down, total revenue goes up. This is an elastic good. That's simple. I can show you the math. I'm going to show you the math. There's other ways for you to calculate it, but honestly, grab a rubber band. I'll let you use a rubber band on the test. I will not flag you on the AI that's going to monitor your test for having a rubber band. That's fine, because you can have these different sort of relationships. You can figure it out, right? You can think price cut, increase total revenue, boom, stretchy. This means it's elastic. Okay, all right, let's think of another situation. What if I gave you another example and then it was like, okay, so we're gonna have a price cut. So price goes down again. This is our price hand, it decreased. And then we say, okay, and then total revenue, on our total revenue hand, that also decreased. What happened to the rubber band? Not stretched out, right? We haven't pulled it far apart. This is not stretched out. This is an inelastic good. That means that I'm not making more money in my bank account. I cut the price and I'm not making more money. That's an inelastic good. If I cut the price and I'm making more money, that's an elastic good, where we have the stretchy rubber band. Ta-da! Isn't that kind of cool? I always think that that's just sort of a neat way of thinking about the total revenue test. So to be able to figure out if something's going to be elastic or inelastic. So let's think about elasticity and total revenue. What does this sort of relationship even look like? Well, okay, so we know as we're going down in price, we're you know, in our elastic demand side, when we're really, really high price. If we reduce, this is good for us, right? We're making more money. If we go from $25 a pizza with no one in my store to $22 a pizza with some people in my store, I have increased the amount of money in my bank account. I have increased my total revenue. This is when we have elastic demand. When we have elastic demand, price cuts make sense because I make more money in my bank account the more I cut prices. Now, eventually, we're going to keep moving down this line. We're going to get to unit elastic, where for each percent point that I cut my price, I increase my income by about 1%. It's a one-for-one situation. It doesn't really help me out much there. And then we're getting to the inelastic part. When we get to inelastic, the price cuts are no longer doing me good. If I have $5 pizzas, everybody who wants a cheap pizza will already be at my store, right? If I give you $1 off a $5 pizza, it's already fairly inelastic. I'm not going to get a lot of extra people for that. It's not going to do me a lot of good. My total revenue is going to go down because we're in an inelastic zone, and a price decrease is actually hurting my total revenue. And that's the idea of like price decrease, total revenue goes down, not stretchy rubber band. Inelastic. It doesn't help my bottom line. It doesn't help my bank account. So if you're going to have a price cut, you need a price cut when you're in the elastic demand area. Oh, okay. So we have another curve. Notice that we had our downward sloping demand line. We have our upward sloping supply line. Now we have this one that looks like a parabola, right? It's going to, actually it looks like an arch. It looks like the St. Louis arch. And this one is just kind of looking at our total revenue. So what this is on the x-axis, we see the quantities of pizza. We go from 0 to 25 to 50 in this particular example. On the left-hand side, we see, or along our y-axis, oops, we see our revenue. Okay, so I can have $50 in my bank account. If I sold 50 pizzas for $1, sure. If I sold 15 pizzas for $10, okay, then I'd make a little bit more money. If I sold so on and so forth, we're going to keep increasing. So this area right here, where we're close to the origin, this represents our elastic area. So this is when prices were like $25 a pizza. I wasn't really making any money because no one was buying them. Okay, then we start to decrease to about $22, $21. The amount of money in my bank account goes up, right? Because this is in the elastic zone. Price decreases are helping me here. Price cuts are good when we're elastic. So I drop it to $18. I drop it to $16, so on and so forth, until we hit this maximum total revenue. That's where we're unit elastic. When we're at unit elasticity, when a price cut's going to result in the same percentage change to my total revenue, that's when I stop. That is when we are at the maximum amount of money that we can have in our bank account. Our price cuts at that point will no longer help us. That's something important to know. Because right here, let's say like we're at about $12.50, right? At $12.50, I should no longer be giving price cuts. If I instead make my pizzas $10 and then $6 and then $5 and then eventually free, well, look at the quantity of pizzas. I'm going to have 50 pizzas walking out the door if they're free. But how much money am I going to have in my bank account? Well, that's next to zero. Actually, that's just zero. So in our elastic zone, the amount of money in our bank account goes up. Unit elastic, that's the maximum amount of money we can make. That's our maximum total revenue. After that, it decreases when we're in our inelastic zone. When we're inelastic, price cuts end up hurting us. We have less money in our bank account afterwards. Isn't that kind of neat? When you one day decide to start a business, or if you already have a business, or if you need to do something else, you can start to think about the elasticity. You can see what changes are happening to your bank account relative to what changes are happening in price, and you can figure out the math, and you can know, is a price cut actually going to help you or not? Or is it not going to help you? Should you actually raise the price? Is it something that's relatively inelastic and you can raise the price and people are still going to buy just as much of it? You know, those are really important things to know if you're going to be a business owner one day or whatever else you want to do with your lives. All right, so with our elasticity and total revenue, oh, this is just going through the same example again. I'm going to leave this exercise up to the reader. Here's a much larger version of that total revenue graph. But essentially, what does this boil down to? It boils down to what your expenditures and your elasticity are going to look like, right? So if your demand for a good or service is elastic, that means that a 1% price cut is going to increase the amount that you buy by more than 1%. Really super cute sweaters go on sale by 1% and you buy more than 1% more sweaters, you're elastic. Right? The amount of money you're going to spend on that item is going to go up. Your expenditures are going to increase. So the amount of money that you're going to be swiping at the like pay station, that's going to increase. Let's think about, what if you're inelastic? I only want one adorable, cute blue and green shirt. Only one. Price goes down by 1%. I still only buy one. My buying patterns do not change at all. Well, then, well, there's a price decrease on it. I'm still buying the same amount. That means technically, if I'm buying something that's cheaper and I'm still only buying one of them, what has happened to my expenditures? What's happened to the amount of money that I'm swiping at the credit card machine? Well, it's going down. All right, so my expenditures decrease in that situation. So if my demand for an item is elastic, then when it goes on sale, my expenditures increase. That means that there's more money going out of my bank account and into the store's bank account. If we're inelastic, so I'm going to buy the same no matter what, then if there's a price decrease, I'm spending less money and the store's getting less money in their bank account. Okay, cool. Unit elastic, no changes. It's really just that funny, weird case. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop there. From here, we've made it about through 2/3 of the material in chapter 4. Whew! We've done it. We're getting there. You have one more video after this. Remember that the midterm is on chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, which means that you have a midterm that you need to start thinking about. Please remember that there are office hours. Please remember to reach out to me. If there's something that you would love to have gone over, or something that you would really like explained further, please let me know. I can make videos about it. I can make lectures. I can meet with you. I can do office hours. I can make graphs. There's no excuse to fail this exam because I will be there to help you every step of the way if you need it. Just reach out to me. Okay, everybody have a fantastic good time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stretch your legs, come back for the next video or watch it tomorrow or do what you need to do. But I will see you soon. Okay, bye-bye.